It's time for the No-Nonsense Roundtable. Insights to capture your imagination from people you know and people you'd like to know about. Each week, a different guest from a different walk of life. Now, here is the host of the No-Nonsense Roundtable, Dom Genova.
Well, welcome to another edition of your No-Nonsense Roundtable. I'm Dom Genova, your host, every Saturday, 10 to 11, right here on News Radio WHAM 1180. And I have a special guest with me today that everybody knows. He is Todd Baxter, the Monroe County Sheriff, has a lot to say. What precipitated this invitation for this particular show is that I saw a video that the sheriff did in front of the state capitol with a clarion call to our legislators talking about safety, and especially safety in Rochester. We have a state of emergency, right. A lot of different issues that are involved with that. And from talking to the sheriff, there's a lot of things that you know about, and there's a lot of things that you don't know about. And we're going to go into that today, into some depth. So thanks for being here.
It's great to be here. You know, and you segued perfectly into it. We know about the violence, right? Everybody sees it. Rochester's 150% increase over Buffalo and Syracuse and all these neighboring cities. Something different is occurring here. We know about the violence, and we don't know about the other crimes that are occurring because of these reforms that are out there. And again, some for just reasons, but you know, there needs to be some tweaks to these. We've created a culture of criminality, and whether it's violent crime or other crimes occurring, and the point of my video was, hey, you need to listen to us in Monroe County. There's something very bad occurring here. What's occurring in the rest of the communities, we need to work on those too, but Rochester's is unique right now.
The thing that you said, the direction we should go, you said an environment of criminality.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I haven't heard it put quite that way before. Why don't you expand on that?
Yeah, and I'd hate to pivot off the violence, because that's obviously paramount, right? People are dying, 400 people shot, families destroyed, overwhelming our systems, the EDs, the medical staff, the long-term rehab staff over at our local hospitals are all overwhelmed with this 150% increase in violence. But there's more crime occurring. You know, you think about what occurred with legalization of marijuana, right? There's been 5 sweeping changes. People forgot it. In the last 3 years, 5 sweeping changes, legalization of marijuana being one of them, right? Sounds like a good idea. I really have no stake in the game, right? We're law enforcement. But when you create a legalization of a product and you don't create the infrastructure to sell the product legally, you create a black market. And we've always known the black market in marijuana has been there for years. But what you've done is you compounded that black market tenfold, made it stronger. And now it's the biggest dog on the street running that market. And that's where you're seeing a lot of this violence related to legalization of marijuana. And that's where I get so frustrated with my legislators. Like, you create these new laws, but you don't even have a rollout process. You don't have an educational process. You don't have the infrastructure set in place. And that causes chaos in our community. It doesn't help. You're causing more chaos, even when your intentions might have been good. But you got to slow down and talk to the experts. You got to get people into the room that know how to do a business plan, if you will. Because you created a new business, legalization and selling of marijuana. Mm-hmm. No problem. That's what you want to do. But you didn't get business folks in there and say, how are we going to roll out the business part of this?
Well,
someone's going to do the business, because marijuana's not going away. It's only getting sold more.
Well, I have this expression, the worst law of all is the law of unintended consequences.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely. And everything has an intent and an unintended consequence. When I do discipline in the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, I talk about that all the time. Like, we're gonna issue this discipline. There's intended consequences, but there's gonna be unintended consequences. What are they? Let's blind spot those right now, and let's roll through those. Let's manage through those. Our legislators have pushed out 5 sweeping changes down the I-90 corridor to all our communities. And I can tell you right now, just by looking at marijuana or raise the age, where you took 16 and 17-year-olds out of jail, maybe a perfectly plausible reason, maybe good intentions, but you didn't build a children's detention center first. What do we do with these kids if they can't go to the local jail, yet they're committing criminal activity? This is incredibly incompetent at best.
So when these legislators are crafting these laws, how much input do they get from you?
I hear they get a lot of input, but I'm part of I'm the elected official in Monroe County, what our 3rd largest city. I'm part of the New York State Sheriff's Association, which represents 57 elected officials throughout every county in New York State. We've had no input. We give input all the time, but it's not listened to when we hear these things. But they don't call us for a think tank. They don't call us for how's this going to look in your community when this rolls out. Zero.
That sounds like a root problem. So what you're saying is that people in positions of power are making laws and decisions and not getting the input that they that you would recommend that they have?
Well, yeah, you should get subject matter experts, right? That's what we call them in the Army. You get your SMEs, your subject matter experts, and get them in a room and craft your legislation around those folks. And it may be not everything they want, right? I'm law enforcement. I'm very pro law and order, right? But so you want to lighten up some of these things. You want to make it more, less restrictive on our community when it comes to minor crimes and things like that. You could do that and also meet the tenets of public safety at the same time. You have to have, at the end of the day, we have to have a safe public, right? Everybody in the public has to feel safe and know that they're safe and know that they're protected. And when you don't, what you see is people not reporting crimes anymore. You see people taking crime in their own hands, and you see that unfolding right in front of us. You know, am I calling for that we got a state of vigilantism? No, but when you run a mom and pop store and things are being stolen and the government can't protect your store and your work and your family, at the end of the day, you're going to do it, right?
And I think just from the outside, I see that we pay a lot of attention to the capital crime and the murder and whatever, and we don't see the rest of this stuff. And you were saying before the show, there's a lot of stuff going on that people just aren't aware of.
Yeah, we did a point-in-time survey. Catalytic converters, very, very, it's being stolen by 1,000 so far this year in our county. Just in Monroe County, 1,000 have been lost. That's 1,000 victims waking up in the morning and going out to start their car, and they can't go to work. They can't go to take their kids to school because their catalytic converter's been cut off in the middle of the night. But it's not just that. It's broad daylight in U of R, RIT parking lots. Catalytic converters being cut off while people are working, coming out, and now they're thousands of dollars in the hole. Right, their insurance company is going to go up, and the point there is we've arrested certain. We got a family we know them by name. 7 felony charges so far this year. We know who they are. We're putting charges on them already, and they're still out there stealing catalytic converters and creating victims out there.
So what's stopping them from being stopped?
Well, it's a matter of being able to detain people that are repeat offenders, or being able to detain people that are violent in our community, that are carrying guns in our community in this state of violence that we're having that's off the charts. But there's no mechanism for us as a society to look at these folks when they're being charged with these crimes, they're repeat crimes, to detain them in a local jail. There's no mechanism. The judges can't do it. They don't have the power. And you can say that word bail. I don't even like to talk about bail. It's a 4-letter word. Is this person a danger to us, or is this person a repeat offender that refuses to quit victimizing our neighbors? And if so, then detain them long enough to at least figure out what's going on in their life, make a security and safety plan, and then release them with a cognitive decision, not an emotional decision that was made years ago under bail reform, right? Tom, let's go back to violence. We got a guy walking our streets right now. He's pulled the trigger 3 times this year. He's got caught with guns 3 times in this pandemic of violence, and he got out the other day for $50,000. I don't care if you're a billionaire or you're a poor kid living in a tough neighborhood that doesn't have $5. If you're dangerous, you're dangerous, right? So, this guy got out for 50. So the bail money's irrelevant. The amount of cash, whether you're poor or rich, should not have a determination on where you are. And it shouldn't on the negative. We shouldn't detain people because they're poor, right? Right. We shouldn't detain people, and we also shouldn't let rich people out of jail when they commit violent crime. So we should look at these people as individuals and make our determination. But the judges have no authority. People want to blame the judges right now, but some of these. You created a law that says least restrictive means that when you place bail on someone, you have to make it an amount the person can post, right? So we created an environment where you can't detain people that are violent or repeating the same crime over and over.
So what you're saying is that the judges don't have a tool that they used to have.
Yeah, and even if they used it inappropriately, because bail in New York State was always designed to make people come back to court. And that's the way the law was written. So, and it was bastardized over the years that we actually used it as a danger standard, right? All right, this guy's dangerous. He had this much cocaine on him, and he had a gun. We're going to detain him so. When you threw out the baby with the bathwater, you ripped up the old law and you created a new law. At least you could do is put in the tools that we're missing, improve the new law, and also give us the tools that we're missing. And everybody agrees there should be a dangerous standard, right? That's
right.
That's black and white. There's no one you can really argue with that says that, because here's the other 49 states out of 50 have a dangerous standard. New Jersey just did bail reform, and in their bail reform, they added a dangerous standard to it, right? And we're the one of only. We're the only one. Think about this. That's ludicrous.
That leads me into my next question. We're going into a break, though. I'll get to answer that question when you get right back. Well, you're back listening to the No-Nonsense Roundtable here today with Monroe County Sheriff Todd Baxter. And there's some things that just, on this show, you just don't believe them. So out of 50 states, we're one that doesn't have a safety standard in our bail.
In our bail, and we're still debating on the state of Mississippi, so that's our argument point, whether they have a danger standard or not, because it's kind of convoluted. But at best, there's 48. The federal government has a danger standard, right? So when you're charged with a federal crime, you can take danger into consideration for detention.
Okay, so here's the theoretical question. So you have somebody who threatens to kill their significant other.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You take them in on domestic violence thing, whatever. You put them in front of a judge, and because they haven't actually done anything yet. Yeah. Okay. They haven't actually done anything yet. It was just right now. It's just a threat. Okay? Yeah. So the judge has to set bail at what they can afford.
What they can afford. Right. Right. It's all designed to bring them back to court. The law changed, but it changed and has the same tenets to place less bail on people. But the bail you do place is designed to bring them back to court. It has nothing to do with how dangerous you are to the community.
So letting this person spend the night in jail to cool them off,
right.
So a cooler head will prevail. So they're not all
intoxicated, right? Filled with rage. This is a domestic incident that's been going on for 10 years, and finally boiled over that the police got called. Because we don't get called at the first domestic incident, right? We don't get called at the third one. These are years sometimes building up, and then pops. And maybe we just have what we call harassment in New York State, where you threaten to kill me. In the domestic violence law, it says that I can bring you before a judge and arraign you because now it's domestic, right? Uh-huh. But the judge still must release on least restrictive means.
So let me ask you a question. So somebody is involved, let's say, in drugs. Yeah. Okay. So they have lots of money.
Exactly.
But you don't, it's not declared less. So how does the judge set bail for somebody who doesn't have obvious means of getting money?
Well, that's the Q&A that occurs during this hearing, right? And the judge looks at the financials, and the lawyers present that information, and one side argues for more bail, right? And the other side argues for less bail because he has no money, and then a judge makes a determination based on the individual. But the idea, again, is release. The whole thing is designed around release. People should not be going and detained before they're convicted, which we all believe in. We love our Constitution.
Right.
But again, if they're a repeat offender and or dangerous to our community, the judges still have to have that thing called least restrictive means. The whole premise is not to keep people detained before a conviction.
I'm sorry. It just sounds so absurd. I was a car dealer for all those years. How much does the car cost? Well, what can you afford?
Right.
I mean, that's not what it is. I mean, you have to pay the price for it. So that's just one part of this law that sounds like it's a little screwed up. What's the rest of it, too? I mean, there's other dynamics to the laws in the state of New York that just don't make a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, I think again, when you create legislation, especially the massive, I try and emphasize this point. We've had massive reforms, quote unquote, to these laws. We've had less is more, that deals with parolees and parole. We've had raise the age, that deals with 16 and 17-year-olds where they could be placed upon criminality. We've had legalization of marijuana. We've had bail reform. These came. Think about the culture that we created from Albany coming down the pipeline. I talk about, right? They've been so fast and furious and done, I would say, out of emotion a lot, as opposed to logic, that it's created this environment of lawlessness in our community where young people are saying, I can't go downtown. That's what I grew up in the city of Rochester. It was called downtown when I was a kid. When we had contact with the police, you don't want to go downtown. Well, there's no fear of going downtown anymore. That means jail, by the way, if you don't know. There's no fear of going downtown, even for the overnight. And a domestic violence case, whether alone you're out breaking people's windows or you're repeatedly stealing people's catalytic converters by the dozen sometimes in a night, there's no fear of staying downtown. And at least for a cool-off period, like you said, or if you're carrying a gun in New York, you're carrying a gun in Rochester, New York, of all places, where we've had 150% increase in violence. There should be a cool-off period and figuring out what the heck's going on in that kid's life that forces him, quote unquote, to carry a gun, or he's just a gangbanger and he wants to go up and shoot up his neighborhoods and he doesn't care about other people. 51% of those people have walked out of jail or got an appearance ticket so far this year. We've grabbed 468 people with guns, and 51% walked out low bail or no bail. We're just throwing fuel into the fire
Well, and it seems like there's a resistance to listen and to change. I mean, in any,
At the end of the day, right?
yeah, in any production process, you're going to have something that doesn't. You're going to have a lack of quality. I mean, you're not going to have a perfect. You're not going to have a perfect part in every part of a car. You know, but you hope on an airplane that the door is going to be perfect.
Right.
So I mean, how much of this is just the pendulum going too far the other way?
Well, and that's human nature, right? That's reaction to situations that occur in our community, anywhere, that in business, as you alluded to. But you got in the military. I was trained for 22 years in the Army. You spend months preparing for a line of departure. That means your plan. You're going to execute the plan. Take that hilltop, right? Just as much as the preparation that goes into logistics and the maneuverability and the support mechanisms and the fallback plans, that's our DNA. And there's also an after action review. As soon as you're done with the mission, you do a debriefing. You do it. What did we do right? What do we do more of? And our legislators absolutely refuse. That's my video in Albany. They absolutely refuse to do a debriefing on any of these things and say, you know what, we can make some small adjustments. Now, the governor, I'll give her credit. She made a couple adjustments in May of this year. But again, not even close to where they need to be. You know, there's still all this criteria that's got to occur to detain someone that's carrying a gun. A guy got out the other day, 3 times he shot at people, 3 times he's had a gun, and he's out for $50,000. Think about that. He should not be out. And we can't have those logical conversations with our legislators to say, you know, I go to this. I'm going to be very bold. I look at these. Who are you loyal to?
Right.
Are you loyal to the people you represent in these communities? You're loyal to the people in Monroe County, or you're loyal to someone else in Albany or downstate? Who are you loyal to at the end of the day? You got to be loyal to your constituents. Doesn't mean you give the sheriff everything he wants for it, but it means you sit down with the sheriff and go, how can we help you keep our community safe? That's all I'm asking for.
So if you have legislators who are not willing to change, it sounds like you're saying to change the legislators.
Yeah, and the sheriff is going to stay apolitical as possible, but I do say get out the vote. Get out the freaking vote. Be part of this process. Understand what's occurring. Get educated in what's occurring in front of you, and then vote appropriately, how you see that the most appropriate. But don't sit back on the sidelines. We can't afford that. People are dying right in front of us. I'm not being dramatic. 150% increase in violence affects us all. It affects you. It affects, 81 murders, 416 people shot. Think about the ripple effect to our community. So if you live in the suburbs and the violence ain't touching you, it's touching you. I guarantee you. When your kid is sick and you go to the ED and the ED has had 150% increase in violence and violent activity, they're not going to treat your broken leg. Mm-hmm. They can't. They got to deal with the violence first, and that's what they should do. Of course they should. It's triage. But with that being said, there's only so much capacity in these systems, and we've increased violence in our community by 150%.
Yeah, and that's we're going to talk about this right after the break, because there's more to it than that. Because you were talking before the show about underreported crimes, other crimes that are being encouraged by the lack of consequences for people that are doing violent crimes, and the culture. And we'll talk a little bit more about the culture that you have to deal with now. Your personnel, your officers, the defund the police that was quite popular a while back, and how this has all affected your job and affected us all as
you know, because it affects us all. When you're affecting law enforcement, you're affecting the community.
Well, and that's it. You have a reputation, and when people think of Rochester, they don't think of just Rochester proper. They think of Rochester as a whole community. These how many hundreds of square miles that we're talking about here. So we'll get more into that after the break. We'll be back talking to Monroe County Sheriff Todd Baxter in a second, but first I'd like to play a clip from a movie produced in 1976. It was called Network, and the character who's a national news anchor has enough and vents on national TV.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street, and there's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know the air is unfit to breathe, and our food is unfit to eat. We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value. So, I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
Kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it? We're here today to talk about one of the things he's venting about, and it's crime. He talks about the culture of crime, and I know, Todd, you have some strong opinions about the culture of crime in today's society. So why don't you share this with us?
Yeah, we talk about the reforms. We also got to talk about the rhetoric, right? The defunding the police, the lack of trust in police, and some earned by law enforcement. We're not perfect like any other organization. We're here talking about legislators, right? Right. They're not perfect, neither are we. But with that being said, when you vilify a whole group and refuse to sit down and build trust with us and us build trust with you, that erodes public safety also. When you talk about defunding the police, when you talk about don't respect authority and things like this, these are not cliches. These build culture. And over time, when you build a culture of lack of law and lack of order, and then when you start yelling at me when I say those two terms out in public environments, you can't say law and order anymore. Like, I thought our whole society was built on laws or that creates order in our community. These are the conversations we're having. And I'm looking at people and like, are we really saying we don't want laws that create order? And if you don't have laws that are enforced, you're not going to have order. It's really that simple. It's like a principle of economics that you dealt with for years in the business, right? Yeah. There's certain things that are principles that you can't get away from.
Well, the thing, my personal opinion about it was that why is it a zero-sum game? Mm-hmm. Why do you defund the police? Because you need mental health services.
Absolutely.
I mean, you need both.
Absolutely.
You need both. So you need somebody to put out the fire, and then you need fire prevention too. Right, so you can't say take the money away from the fire department.
Yeah. When's the last time you've seen a school burn and kids lose their lives in a school? Why? Because we did all the preventive things, right? The carpeting's made fireproof, the chairs are fireproof, there's fire drills, right? All this preventive stuff absolutely works. But you got to put the investment into it, and that's the foundation. But at the same time, you still got to have a fire department. Right. You still got to have firemen to go into that school. God forbid there's a combustible material in there, or someone comes in and throws gasoline into the school where your kids are. You don't give up both. You do both at the same time. But you don't defund the fire department to make sure you have fire extinguishers.
I have this little quote on my desk. I've had this for about 40 years. It said, "A rattlesnake loose in the living room tends to end any discussion of animal rights."
That's a good one, right? Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at the defund the police. The defund police was very popular back when.
Sure it was.
But now you have this incredible increase in crime. Yeah. It's not as popular to wear that outfit
you got
anymore.
The president talking about how many millions and billions he's going to give to law enforcement, which is fine and dandy. That's good. We'll take the money. We need more police officers. We need more recruitment. We need better equipment. We need safety for our deputies, right? We got to give them good ballistic vests. And so yes, God bless you. Thank you for doing that, Mr. President. But at the same time, you got to go out and say law and order is important in our society, and this lack of law and order, this lawlessness is unacceptable. At least say it's unacceptable. We're going to do something about it.
Well, a very wise man once said, when you take the honor away from the job, you're not going to get candidates that want to apply to be. And you know what that was?
No.
You.
That's awesome.
I think that was I think that was the first time you were on the show.
Yeah,
when you take the honor, because nobody in law enforcement, you're not doing it for the money.
Yeah,
you're not doing it for the money. You're doing it for the better society, to make your life make some meaning to it. It's not doing it for the money. So when you start vilifying the job, you start having people that just don't want to do the job. And how is your recruitment now? You probably had a little bit of a problem with it, right?
Oh yeah, we got one heck of a problem. And again, what parent set is raising their kids to say you want to go into law enforcement in 3 or 4 years from now? You're a young kid. Mm-hmm. Who's encouraging their kids to go into this chaotic environment that they see vilified on TV? And even for the most honorable, noble reasons, the public servant part of this thing is it's honorable, it's noble. But I'm sure wives and husbands are not looking at their significant other and going, hey, why don't we try that civil service test coming up, and why don't you go become a police officer and deal with all this crap? Right?
Yeah.
Deal with all this crap when you can go get a safe job somewhere. And I'm not talking physical safety, but they want to be appreciated, right? If people are going to enter this job, at least you can do is appreciate them. And when you don't show that appreciation, you get lack of people signing up to do this job. We did it in Vietnam, right? With the post-Vietnam era, recruiting for the Army was very, very difficult until we raised the stature of the soldier back to this honorable, noble servant. And then recruitment's a lot easier. And filling your ranks and retaining your people are a lot easier. But when you vilify, who's going to go into the car market, right? And join a job if all we said is, negative stuff about car business. Right?
Well, I think we're at a point, or we're at an inflection point now. I mean, especially with this election coming up. You're in inflection. If your representatives will not do what the community wants, then you either have to get them to do that in some way or other, politically expedient way, or you need to replace them. I mean, those are the only two choices to getting change, right? They either have to admit that there's a problem, that there's unintended consequences, without throwing somebody under the bus and saying they're bad people. It was a mistake. You need to reconnoiter. Sometimes
improve.
Sometimes you're talking about a military analysis or whatever. You need to retreat in order to advance someplace else. You need to do that, and if you're unwilling to do that, well, then you need to change the command, right?
Well, go back to the military analogy. Sometimes it's called a tactical withdrawal, right? So we're going to tactically withdraw from this objective. We're going to reconnoiter the next one, and then we're going to make a plan to re-execute the plan. I still want that hilltop, but maybe I come back at it a different way with different tactics. We cannot sit here and say there's no problem.
Right.
And we can't sit here and go, well, it's happening in New Jersey. It's happening in California. I'm not responsible for New Jersey and California. I have a sphere of influence in Monroe County. So do these representatives. They got a sphere of influence. So if at least you can say there's a problem and we don't know what the cause is, that's fine. But let's address the problem. Let's do something about the problem, especially like as your analogy again earlier. I can live without the windshield wipers working a couple times, but I can't live in my car without the brakes working, right? And you got to stop the car and do something about the brakes not working. And that's all I'm saying. We got to stop this car. It's spiraled. The flywheel is turning so fast in Monroe County with violence and crime that's what I pleaded with my legislators in the governor's office the other day. You got to stop the flywheel from spinning. It's out of control.
Well, and one of the things,
it's real.
right. But one of the things that you brought up before, and I want to make sure we get into this before the show is over, is the unreported crime and the crime that's happening with all these other things. Well, how did you wear it? The serial larcenists?
Serial larcenists. They're out there.
I mean, let's explain that to our
we got
our
PowerPoints on them. We got PowerPoints on their whole structure. We got PowerPoints. We got data. Everybody wants this data, right? So, catalytic converters have probably lost over 1,000 in Monroe County just this year. And we got certain family sets that are doing a majority of this, hundreds and hundreds of catalytic converters. At least $2,000 worth of damage on your vehicle, right? And sometimes you're going to your insurance and jacking your rate up. Sometimes you're not reporting them. Car dealerships don't report off, and they just fix them. But it's probably about $1.5 million that we can account for in stolen property from our community, right? So we said, all right, so how many are underreported? So we went down Ridge Road, went door to door on Ridge Road from the Greece border out to the Monroe County border, and we found out catalytic converters were underreported a third, at least a third. Right, so think about that. Now the box stores, no one's going to go to jail for a petty larceny anymore. So the box stores are out there. They're not reporting some of these larcenies. You got people walking out with Makita saws in boxes, and we're not detaining these people, right?
So when you go to buy Makita saws,
you're paying for it
because somebody stole one.
Yeah, or you got to wait for a manager to come over because now it's locked behind a cage that you can't even touch the material in stores anymore. We got stores closing down because they can't afford the leakage, if you will, right? Is that the term I think they use? The shrinkage. I'm sorry, the shrinkage out there. They're losses.
Yeah, but you really don't see that on TV, and I think that's one of the problems. Yeah, it is occurring, but that's why you're doing this clarion call.
Yeah, exactly. We're all paying the price for all these things, let alone they're coming to a community near you. Whether it's not your community today, it's going to be your community tomorrow.
Well, and it's eroding part of the culture of Rochester, or of any place that has crime like that, because it's obviously is not an incentive for you to do business or have a home or whatever. Crime is not a good thing to advertise.
No community. And that's what bleeds my heart. I walk the city of Rochester. I grew up in the city of Rochester. It bleeds that no one, it seems like no one cares. And that's not right. That's not who we should be.
We're about ready to head into a break, but I have one word I'm going to ask you when you come back. The word recidivism. Do I have that? Do I have that word right?
You do have it right.
Okay. Well, right after this.
Right.
So welcome back. You're listening to the No-Nonsense Roundtable. I'm here with Sheriff Todd Baxter, Sheriff of Monroe County, and we were talking during the break about the word recidivism, what it means, and how it's being used by some, people in political office to justify the things the way they are.
Yeah, and it's a tough thing to measure. We're measuring people being re-victimized. We're measuring people who leave incarceration and commit a criminal activity, and we're using that as a data set that's really quite elusive. And our legislators are looking at that and going, well, there's no need to reform the reforms because there's no repeated crime that no one's going out. It's almost impossible to measure those things, right? If you think about it. And we talked about the survivor bias, right? That study you shared with me, it was fascinating, where they studied airplanes shot up in World War II. Right, and it's the airplanes that came back, and they said, "Well, where do we up armor these airplanes?" But they failed to look at the airplanes that didn't come back.
Right,
those are the actual ones you wanted to protect, but we didn't have that data set. Right, so same thing here. We're trying to measure and hold data to something that we can't measure, and that's what people are out reoffending. Right, reoffending how many times before we capture them again?
Right, I had
it's an impossible measurement sometimes.
No, it depends what you're measuring.
Right,
I mean, the things you're measuring,
the data you're looking for.
Right, I mean, if you're only measuring the people that don't get arrested again or convicted again, it is ignoring all the new people.
Thank you.
All the people that are being encouraged to do a crime because there's a lack of consequences, right?
Yeah, and going back to our analogy of the influenza or COVID, right? It's that person that has it that's spreading it through our community. But then if you let that ripple, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. You cordon off the problem, and we know certain people in our community are offending because we apprehended them once already, right?
Right.
We at least know they're an offender, and we don't even look at them and say, how do we keep this person from reoffending, let alone spreading the virus, right? And that's what we're doing in our community. We're spreading this virus because we create this culture of lawlessness, and it's the minor crimes sometimes that we're letting go. Not so much the violence sometimes, but the minor crimes that tell other people, hey, he can do it, why don't I?
Right.
I'm the opportunist, right? I didn't want to be a criminal, but if he's getting away with it, why wouldn't I try it?
Right, and some people that are career criminals are career criminals, right? I mean, we can all agree on that. I mean, there's some people that are just, you're not going to be able to do anything with them, right?
And those are our super spreaders, COVID, right? That's our super spreader. We know who the super spreader is. So what are we doing with the super spreader? Right? Are we detaining the super spreader? We did it with COVID. We don't want to do a gun violence. Think about that. We're willing to detain people for COVID, but we're not willing to detain people for carrying a gun in Rochester, New York right now that's destroying hundreds of our community members.
Well, and I think the fascinating concept is that the culture will encourage other people to do things they normally wouldn't have done. Isn't that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, we have a theory, is a crowd mentality theory we talk about in the police academy where, if one person does one thing, then two people are going to do it. If they see someone getting away with it, they see someone doing it, they see a good consequence out of it, like notoriety on Facebook or braggability with your friends, or they got something, they were able to go out and steal something, they got something I always wanted. Well, if there's that opportunity to do it and you can see other people getting away with it, it's a crowd mentality. It's a psychology thing that you can study and read about right now. There's studies out there saying, we've all seen the video where one guy starts dancing in the middle of a field at a concert, and all of a sudden two people start dancing, three people, and all of a sudden the whole thousands of people on a grassy knoll are dancing because one guy got away with it, one guy got up, looked silly, whatever. It's a crowd mentality. This is psychology 101, and we're not willing to address this when it comes to crime.
Well, so something's got to change. I mean, it's not getting better. I mean, this isn't something that's healing itself. So, what's your suggestion? I mean, your suggestion is to
Well, change is difficult, right? Change is the most difficult thing. There's again studies on change and the change model, and people at the end of the day got to know what's in it for them. Right, the legislators got to know what's in them for it to create just some minor changes. That's all we're asking. The voter needs to go, what's in this for me? That's why it's powerful that they're hopefully listening to this, going, because it's affecting every one of us. The minor crimes, quote unquote, unless you're the victim of it, you might just ignore that. But that minor crime is costing you money. That petty larceny from Home Depot and Lowe's are costing you money. It's costing you money every time you go to buy a product. It's costing time. The violence in the city of Rochester is costing all of us. Think about that school teacher that's got to teach a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old that their brother or sister got shot the night before or 2 weeks ago, or they've seen a shooting on their street. Think about the school teacher trying to teach. Think about the ambulance crew that's worn out. Think about the emergency department that's worn out, the rehab staff, the fire departments. The cost to us is incredible, not just financial, but the cost in our community. And that's where I'm imploring our legislators, listen to, this is real world stuff, and you have a responsibility to at least listen and get experts in a room and create a safer environment, because it affects every one of us. You can't hide about someone else's problem. This is a problem for all of us.
Well, I think the toughest thing for people to do sometimes is change. You say in bad marriages, bad jobs, whatever, because you just don't want it. You just don't want to change. And so a change needs to be made. And I think what you're saying is, if you don't like the way things are, there's an election coming up, and you have to vote for somebody, whatever party it is, that has a good grasp of the issues of change.
I would say, voter turnout should be the highest we've seen in years, from the standpoint that if we don't do something, if we don't make a statement as a community, if we don't stand up for right and wrong, I am not here blowing smoke up people's pant legs. I'm telling you, there's a real problem, and if we don't address it, it's only going to get worse and bigger. And that flywheel's spinning, as I told the governor's staff the other day. That flywheel in Monroe County is spinning so fast that we got to interrupt it.
And the only comment that I'll make, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, but the thing is, there's going to be no candidate that matches what you want completely. I mean, there's going to be an issue or two here or there.
I'm going to elect the sheriff. I know that.
And you're not going to. I don't think you got 100% of the vote.
Absolutely,
no, you didn't.
Nor should you, right?
No, so should you.
This is America.
But reasonable people can disagree about a bunch of things. But what is the most important thing to you? And obviously, there's a fellow, and I'm sure you learned it in college, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? The number one thing is safety, right?
Safety and security,
right? And before you're a member of a group or satisfied or self-actualized, you have to be safe, right? You have
to be safe,
right? And those people in Ukraine really know that.
And if we're not safe, or at least perceive safety in our community, the education system is affected. The economic system is affected, right? All the systems that are around us are affected by that bedrock of safety, and even a perception of safety. And right now, God forbid, we're a laughing stock of America right now. Rochester, New York, highest crime rate. What are we talking about? It says how can that possibly be our norm?
It says higher than Chicago, which is not something that you want to.
That screws with the housing market. That screws with the job market. That screws with it's affecting all of us, and that's what I'm imploring about people. The legislators in Albany, I called them bobbleheads the other day in Albany. I hate to be derogatory, but they shake their head up and down like a bobblehead. But geez, come on, you can't admit there's something here, and we're going to do something about it. It might not be the perfect plan, but you got to say there's a problem, and you got to say what we're going to do about it. You can't just say, well, we've got to wait for data sets for 10 more years. It's implorable that we got to go forward. I'm begging you. I don't know how to say it any better. I'm begging you as North County Sheriff, go forward, do something.
Todd, I'm laughing because you're such a gentleman. You apologize for using the word bobblehead. There's a lot of guys that are using much worse names than that.
Hey, you know what? I don't think these are bad people.
No,
I can name them all, and I won't. I think they're good people. I think there's some unintended consequences. I think, but I'll go back to, where's your loyalty? Is your loyalty to you're representing us? Fight for us.
Right.
Fight for us. That's all.
Right. You have to represent your community.
So that's why I'm very cautious of my words, because I don't think they're out there intentionally.
No.
I'm just, if it was another business, I'm sure the doctors would stand up. If we're talking about medical fields that were changed, reformed this fast, so hard, I'm sure the doctors would be standing up and screaming, hey, just help us out here. We need some help on these laws to change. That's what we're doing in the law enforcement community.
No. And the thing is that I'm very hesitant about questioning somebody's motive.
Right.
Nobody wants crime.
I don't know.
Nobody wants crime.
They live in the same community we do. They drive cars, right? Right.
No, they might be uninformed, and they might have made a mistake, or and don't have the ability to do a tactical retreat and whatever you call it. What do you call it?
A tactical withdrawal.
Tactical withdrawal.
Sounds a lot better than retreating.
Yeah, right? Yeah, certainly a good marketing term. Right. But that's what the case is. So thank you for coming in today.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks for your show. It's great.
Well, thank you very much. And
congratulations on the ratings, by the way.
Oh, yeah, the ratings have been absolutely fantastic. And we didn't even get a chance to talk about a couple other things we normally, like driving
fast
cars. Driving fast
fun.
cars. So, well, thanks for coming in, and God bless you for what you do, and thank you for what you do.
And I just want to close out the deputies and the staff and the police officers, and these are just phenomenal human beings, and it's so great to be amongst them, let alone have an opportunity to lead them. It's an honor.
Well, thank you. We'll have you on again.
God bless.
Well, thanks for watching this YouTube. If you liked it, please like and share.